Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first in our five-part webinar series on Tasmanian timber. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm the Program Manager of the Tasmanian Timber Campaign. And then presenting today, we have Michael Lee. So Mick has over 30 years experience in the timber industry, focusing on quality control, testing, timber technical properties and research, timber production and systems. He's a certified project professional, very passionate about promoting the correct use of sustainable timber in the built environment. Mick works closely with builders, designers and architects to help them find timber solutions in the built environment, recommending the right timber for the right application, after-sales support within sourcing through the supply chain. And Mick spent many years as a senior technical officer at the Centre for Sustainable Architecture with Wood at the University of Tasmania. So that was over 11 years working in timber research. So he really is the foremost expert in Tasmanian timber, and he is the technical manager for the Tasmanian Timber Campaign. He also answers the expert helpline. So if you ring the helpline that's listed on the Tasmanian Timber website, it is Mick that you get. So he's there to support you with specifying timber and troubleshooting. So without further ado, I will pass over to Mick. Once he gets started, encourage you to put questions into the chat. If Mick can see them as they pop up, and if it's an easy question to answer at that moment, he'll do so. But if it's a bit more of an in-depth response required, we might wait till the end and then come back to it. But otherwise, please enjoy. Over to you, Mick.
Thanks, Claire. That was a bit of a wrap up, but anyway, hi guys. Again, today's presentation is going to be an overview presentation. It really is about directing you to our technical information on the site and what we can provide. So please, if you have any questions, have a look on the site. A lot of people don't know, and a lot of the things we're going to talk about have been brought up in the last 6 to 8 months as questions from architects and specifiers, also the building community. Okay, if anyone doesn't know who the Tasmanian Timber Promotion Board is, it's a corporate body established by an act by the Tasmanian government in 1970. We've been around nearly 40 years. The aim of the board is, as set out in the act, is to promote wood in Tasmania. And we research the use of wood, derivatives, sawn timber and timber products. We market timber, and we're a direct link to the suppliers who are on our site. We can put you in touch with the right people for the right product. We can also tell you and hopefully direct you into the way of trying to find the best product for your projects. We disseminate information, so we've got things like the fire certificates and that on the site, and we'll go through those, and a lot of species information as well. The board is funded by a government-imposed levy collected from the sale of all Crown saw logs. The marketing campaign is also an addition to that, which is a direct push from the Tasmanian industry for the market. Tasmania has over 800,000 hectares of sustainable production forest, of which only 1% is harvested annually. So you can imagine, we've got lifetimes full of timber, and, the sustainability question isn't there. Native forestry is totally sustainable and available. And that's one thing I must stress. The rhetoric and scuttlebutt about Tasmanian timbers not being available is false. Please, if you're after some things like Tas oak and that, jump on the line, give us a call, and we'll put you in touch with the right people. All right, we're here to talk about specifications, and one of the key things we get questions about are grades, the Australian standard grades versus the Tasmanian grades of prime and classic, which we'll talk about further. Technical information down to things like density, workability, joint structures. They're all available on the website. Fire certificates, which are overseen by the Forest and Wood Products Association. So they're an Australia-wide thing, but we do have all of that information on our website, and there's some key things in there which we'll talk about as well. One of the things that can't be denied, sorry about that now, is the functional beauty of using Tasmanian timbers. As you can see, River's Edge Building, University of Tasmania by Wardle Studios. You know, the University of Tasmania have had a real push for a sustainable, low carbon buildings, and as you can see, we've got some beautiful outcomes. Aesthetic appeal, definitely veneers, and we'll talk about veneers and who to talk to specify. We can put you in contact with people for veneers. Britain's Veneers have got the only slicing plant left in Australia and do a beautiful range of products and layups. So, you know, we can put you in contact with the right people there to actually get outcomes. It's a great stretch of a resource. Today, we're going to look at all these things, a bit of grade explanation, look at the Tasmanian grades and where they sit, and have a look at some species information. The other content of what available brochures we have, what technical information, what's next, a little bit about carbon, a little bit of explanation about certification, which we've run before, but we'd like to retouch on, and the fact that Tasmanian timbers are here to stay. Okay, what are grades? A grade is a means to group like timber characteristics, allow customers to specify a product, and allows customers to specify a design trend. This is really important in things like floorings, linings, fit-out material. A grade does not define product quality or influence fit for purpose. Now, I'll explain that a bit further. We use grades to allow this specification to guarantee the product range that we specify within the grade, to guarantee consistency, and consistency doesn't mean things like colour and that. It actually means consistency as written to the grade that's provided, and that's something that people are struggling with. They want a set look. They want a defined aesthetic. The grades are there to define it, but the grade actually defines what that aesthetic is and the range of it through the product. It's also to comply with legal and regulatory. The Tasmanian grades are prime and classic. They're designed for the buyer who prime, which is the higher or the most prominent of the two grades, requires a warmth of timber with more consistent palette. It's more traditional and minimal included characteristics. Classic provides the buyer with a constantly high level of features. So if you're looking for something that really looks timber, if you want, you know, that classic looking gum driven floor, you want high feature, the classic is what you get. The comparison of the two is the comparison between AS2796 listed grades to the prime and classic grades is the quality of the product doesn't change. You know, it needs to be fully dried. It needs all these other things. All areas still covered under the Tasmanian standard for aesthetics still meet the criteria of AS2796 Part 2. The only difference will be the amount of feature in each grade which is specified. All out of specification material will be removed. For example, yellow stain, stick mark, excess pinholes, stains that you know make the timber unusable. And the key thing is it's still fit for purpose under the Australian standard. So moisture content must meet the same standard as any other grade. The machining tolerances don't change. General form, twist, bow and spring. Consistency. The consistency, but this doesn't mean even in the way of colouring and that. It means even in the way of the consistent material in it. And there's a lot more. Quite happy to talk to anyone through these grades, and they will be listed on our website fairly shortly, along with a whole heap of other grade descriptions. One of the keys is a performance requirement. Suitable resistance to service conditions. These need to be these performance requirements need to have a lot of consideration. hardness, toughness, durability. The Sydney Opera House had a softwood floor in several parts of it, driven by the Scandinavian build that, was in there for 30 years, which doesn't have a high Yanker rating, but had a high traffic areas with high durability. So, it's a real consistency in coatings and mixtures of how to use the material that can get the visual and the aesthetic appeals that you're after. Visual consistency in the finished surface from the primary viewing position, and this is quite important. How do we get this to look from where we want to see it? So, large tracts of timber are going to have visual differences, but we've just got to realise what they are when we're looking at them. So this doesn't necessarily mean colour or feature consistency because it is a natural product. Consistency relates to the combination of colour consistency, grain feature, and surface uniformity of a sheet or a finished element. To actually prove this up, you know, all of the companies that are involved in this campaign undergo quality auditing by either myself or the Centre for Sustainable Architecture in Wood. They're held to a high level. Anyone that's not doesn't pass, and we haven't had anyone as yet, thankfully, it will be tabled in front of the whole group. So there is an imperative for these companies. We pick out material at random and look at random runs. So it's not a curated thing that the companies are giving to us. All grade summary information is under review and will be available shortly on the website. And I think Claire will be able to tell us it will be in the next two to 3 weeks, which we'll have them all up, including the select standard and high feature, as well as the prime and classic. So you can really have a look at, what you're actually going to see, some good colorations, some good renders, some things for you to actually have a look at and dig into. Please take note, though, to speak to the suppliers and make sure that their alignment is the same as ours. Okay, species. Tas oak. Tas oak, is a preferred hardwood, multiple applications. Not a lot of it goes into scantling these days. A lot of it does go into mass timber and timber elements that, while the timber is milled in Tasmania, a lot of it's put together on the mainland. We also have, panelling, flooring, veneers, plywoods, anything you could think of. What sets it apart is not just its versatility, but its exceptional quality, and that's been quite true for a long time. So what do we need to do if we're specifying it? Well, if you go to the website, you will find the Tasmanian oak, which will give you a rundown on what's actually there, some rhetoric, and I say it's rhetoric on what Tas oak intends to be, but then it comes down to the properties. And these property document is 6 or 8 pages long, so I'll just do a summary of it and let's have a look at, where we are with it. Availability and appearance. Density, generic to be listed by species. At the moment, it's listed as Tas oak, and we will be listing it by its 3 separate species in future. Durability and environmental details, fire, joint strengths, all the mechanical properties are there, the movement properties, the shrinkage properties, stress, strength and workability are available on all of the Tasmanian species. So everything you need to specify is actually on that website. Anything that's not there, please give us a call, and if we haven't got it, we'll try and source it for you. We'll put you in the right direction of someone who can source it for you. So again, things like density, Yanker hardness, durability classes, environmental details, fire specifically has been a real hot topic of late, which we'll talk about fairly shortly. Blackwood, beautiful timber. There's still an amount of it available, both terrestrially and out of Lake Pyman. There's still a large amount, timeless, beautiful colours. Again, the same blurb on Blackwood. Please have a look at it. You know, the story is the story. The technical details are what, you know, we use to specify, and they're all there. Myrtle. Myrtle's interesting. Myrtle's made a resurgence. There's a lot of it available. There's areas of terrestrial and, you know, stocks held which make it a great commodity for things like flooring and that. I've just observed a floor at the Albert Hall that was put there in the early 1900s, which they've just re-uncovered, ready for use, and it was the original dance floor. So the durability and wearability of that product is unparalleled. So, you know, please have a look at it. It rivals, and the colouring in this photo is interesting. A lot of it's a lot more variegated than that these days that are coming out as we look at different resources in different areas. It rivals spotted gum, and it's quite a great product. Celery top pine, unique, used on all of the ships that are coming into the straits at the moment. All of the Tas TT line boats have got celery top features on them. Great product outside if you want it to grey off. Again, it takes a little bit of finding in the fire indices and that, but they are written there on pages 8. So again, we'll talk about that a bit further. Sassafras is probably, strangely, one of the rarer timbers. It hasn't been machined a lot over and milled in the last few years. Golden sassafras is becoming very popular. The very rare and very unusual black heart is still highly prized for certain furniture and joinery applications. Still available. Companies like Britton's and others and Hydrowood have access to some of this material. Please, if you're after that and you're after the technicals on it, have a look on the website. Anything that's not there, please give us a call or send us an email. Radiata pine. Look, huge tracts of radiata pine plantation in Tasmania and very well utilised by the likes of Timberlink for framing and that. Available, MGP 10, 12, treated, otherwise. Again, Bunnings is not your only seller. Please jump onto us and we can put you directly through to the right pipelines on this and the technical data. There's a lot of work being done by Seesaw in the framing area of radiata pine, and very happy to hook up some people, anyone that wants to talk to Seesaw about this. So, there's the latest AFWI projects and that are going ahead at the moment in this area. Yew and pine. Yeah, we still have some. There are some available. I know Hydrowood has 20 slabs. I know Britton's have material. I know there's slice material. So again, if anyone's got a use for this and are willing to look at the uniqueness of it and the exoticness of it, please give us a call and we'll hook you up with the right people. This beautiful shot by Richard Bennett really shows what a standing tree looks like. Bear in mind that we never cut down a yew and pine tree. The only trees that are made available are those that are found floating in the river or the lakes on the west coast. So we at Hydrowood, I know, secured a log that was logged in the 1920s. It had the logger's stamp on it, and it's only just floated out in the last 12 months. So, there's a very limited supply and a beautiful story and product that goes with this. The new boy to the market, Tasmanian shining gum. Eucalyptus nitens, plantation material. There's a predominantly thinned and pruned heading into the market. Several of the companies are looking at it. Several of the companies are actually in the market with it. It's a beautiful white, clear wood. Very, very well respected, well sought after, perfect for veneers, makes a great layup and it's stunning in its visual presentation. So technically, we haven't at the moment. That's getting worked on as we speak. That will come up with the other grade things in the next couple of weeks. We'll have a full set of specs on the Tasmanian shining gum. Mass timber. This is the River's Edge CLT. Again, Tasmanian timbers into mass timber and GLTs, things like that, into CLT. Not so much these days. Cusp are in rebate at the moment, but are heading back into the market. Companies like Ash in Victoria can supply Tasmanian timber and have done. If you look at on the website, have a look at the beautiful job that Woods Bagot did with the old forestry building. Shows a 30-year-old build joined to a 100-year-old building, upgraded with the latest, and it's just stunningly visually beautiful. But Tasmanian timber, manufactured in Victoria and sent back to Tassie. So there are avenues. We can put you in touch with these people, and it's really clear that this product looks stunning. Again, I know I keep talking about Tas oak veneers, but what a use in this River's Edge. Again, Britain's Timber with the only slices. They have huge expertise in these layups, actual usage and how to get it in. We can hook you up with the right people just to actually get, not only purchase this product, but get the advice from them on how to use it. And for anyone who doesn't know what a veneer is, it's thinly sliced. It's actually quite interesting because it goes from 1 millimetre to 2.5 to thick veneers, which are 6 to 8 mil, which I've seen used in jobs lately. So again, talk to us. Let's have a look at what we can do. It can be placed on a fireproof sheet, so it can be used in areas that you're not initially thinking of. So it can be used as a great aesthetic over a fireproof sheet to give an outcome in commercial areas. And this is one example. What you've got is acoustic baffling, veneer walls, and what they call a mismatched sheet on the roof, which is beautiful design characteristics showing natural timber. This was driven by Wardle Studios and supplied locally by Britons. It's just a beautiful product. Other things that go with that aesthetically are things like laminated benches and that, which McKay Timber and others sell. So again, there's multiple suppliers. I will say with the veneer there is only one, and they have huge expertise. It goes back decades. Other products, engineered, as we talked about. No one at the moment is making large sections in Tasmania. We're heading that way. We do have other appearance products, floorings, linings, laminated products, stair treads, stringers and landings and handrails are really coming into their own out of Tas oak and Tasmanian product. Set length and custom products out of finger jointed products by nearly all of the major suppliers here, and we can put you in touch with the right people there. Does make specifying rather easy. Again, some beautiful application of rough sawn material. That job has gone up into the Hobart City Hall. And classic flooring, when I was talking about visualization and consistency from a single viewpoint, I think this is a classic shot by Alice Bennett. It's just a beautiful floor that was flooded and had to be replaced. I will note to a lot of the architects and specifiers here that the width of the floor is quite narrow to take up unit shrinkage, and the unit shrinkage and the reasons for it are on the website. If you look at any basketball floor, you're looking at 63 to 65 mils wide, not a 200 or a 185 mil plank, because the shrinkage at half a mil or a quarter of a mil is non-visual compared to some of the larger boards. So, there's a consistency there that we're happy to talk to you about and put you in direction of the right people. Engineered floorings become very popular. Neville Smiths, for instance, make one of the, premium lines of, this is a Woodsmith by Neville Smith product. They can give you all the information, all the technical information's on their website. We can hook you up with the right people there. They're not the only ones from Tassie making it, but they are a premium supplier of this product. As you can see, not just for floors, for walls, hard wearing, properly coated. Beauty and function. I mean, this beautiful Blackwood fit out stands and says for itself. That couch by Simon Anker is stunning. I'm not quite sure of the fireplace personally, but anyway, it all adds to the look of the build. But, use of modern plywoods, veneers and structural solids are, outstanding out of the Tasmanian timbers. Timber's different from other construction materials that it possesses a unique terroir. This is from Greg Nolan. I think this is worth reading. It's on our website. Really comes down to when we work with timber, we're utilising a resource that originates from a tree. The harvesting process yields various wood products, all of which retain the fundamental characteristics shaped by millions of years of genetic evolution. We can talk about carbon, we can talk about what we like, we can talk about the value of biophilia. The reality is it is a beautiful natural product that's used for working in our environment. Again, I think Greg, and if you have a look at this little quote, and I won't read it out verbatim, but it's very well worth reading. The available brochures are species, fact sheets, benefits of new timber buildings. We talk about that. How forests store carbon, timber products use less energy.
Mick, we've got a question there just saying that there wasn't one brochure on the website that just showed the aesthetics. And so whilst I thought I'd jump in there because you were talking about brochures, whilst we don't have a specific download with the aesthetics, there are images for each species on the site. But if that's something that is useful as a brochure to download, then we will produce it.
Yeah, and I think we could put in some case studies with that, Claire. These are the kind of things we're looking at. We need some feedback from architects, specifiers, people using it. So while we've got what we would use from a timber industry point of view, we need to know what you guys require, and that is such a great suggestion, Claire. Okay. Reducing the carbon footprint and the environmental impacts of a new building. We know for a fact that UTAS were looking for a 30 to 40% reduction in the forestry build, and I think they received 40, Claire. Yep, so 40% was the figure that they used. Using timber is a brilliant way not only to, lower the carbon, but yeah, it's just such an aesthetically beautiful thing. Forest store carbon. Again, I'm not going to bore you with reading the detail. The detail is there on the website. Please have a look at it. Timber products use less energy. Factual. This is not a fantasy. We read what we like about low carbon concretes and that, but all of these products can be supplanted by the use of timber. A lot of the build in there, especially, and if you have a look at the forestry build that's up on the website at the moment, you've got a dome that was designed by Robert Morris Nunn 30 plus years ago, which is still beautiful. And then along with the Woods Bagot design, it's a stunning build. There's also something that we haven't got here, which is the availability for people to actually work in these kind of builds, which we've just put up on the website. We've looked at the likes of the St Luke's build, and one of their key things was not only to have a healthy building that people wanted to work in, but Also something that'll give a monetary return because people actually want to work, want to study, want to be within these kind of environments. Again, though, they've gone through all the technical process. They've used large engineering companies to get the build up. They've used local expertise to put the build up. And not that this is a mass timber show, but the fact that they could actually do that and mix and match the timbers. Fire was one of the questions that came up originally, but that was soon dispelled after they got the expertise in. Okay, flooring resources, which are always interesting. Acoustic treatments, how wooden floors can insulate and, affect acoustic treatments and how to do it. Flooring installation guides, which is a question we get often. And if you have a look at that beautiful myrtle floor in that shot, you can see what I mean by, the variegation, the colour difference, the wearability of it. It's just great. Again, these installation guides hark back to the building codes and the Australian standard. Flooring options, which tells you, overlays over plies, overlays over other substrates, over concrete, direct stick, joists. All of them are taken up in these flooring options. And installer resources, TasOak fire certificates. We have fire certificates for all the Tasmanian products, and they're all done by the FWPA. They're all done by Warrington Fire, and they're listed on the website. The key question I've had lately is we can't find TasOak on the fire certificate. And the reason you can't find it is it's listed under the 3 species of Eucalyptus delicatensis, Eucalyptus obliqua, and Eucalyptus regnans. And as far as I'm aware, and I'd stand correcting, but as far as I'm aware, the bulk of the material at the moment is in E. obliqua. So if you're looking for E. obliqua or messmate in the fire certificate, you'll find it in all sections for flooring, linings, critical radiant flux. Everything's on that certificate. You do have to read through the whole certificate though, because while it's listed in one section as an overlay floor, like on a substrate, and then a solid floor, and then there's general information. So it's got all the things like smoke development and that. They're all on there. The only thing that's not on there, and I think it's quite understandable, is yew and pine. So we have no fire testing on yew and pine because the amount of it is so small. So not seen by the Forest and Wood Products Association or also the Tasmanian industry as a critical thing. If someone wanted to look at it, simple cone tests to look at radiant flux and smoke are able to be done, but yeah, it's such an exotic that it's not on there. So just letting everyone know that. All available tested species are listed in Table 6 on page 12 of the report, as are the tested minor species. Tas ash is listed in the summary as shining gum or messmate, E. nitens. So again, you won't find Tas ash on there. You'll find shining gum E. nitens, or the messmate obliqua on there. Sorry for the typo on there. So the shining gum's the E. nitens. It's listed on there as a separate, so you have all the fire detail on that. Again, we have a full report from Seesaw that have done all the testing, the University of Tasmania, which we'll get up on the website fairly shortly. This is the report that you're looking for. So that it's the Warrington's report. It's listed under fire certificates on the website, fairly easy to find. Any questions, please come back to us on it. So generic things like moisture content, use, change of calibrations and that using Tasmanian oak are listed there mainly for floor layers. Use of moisture meters on Tas timber, which is really interesting because the amount of times we see people using it in the wrong way and then, throwing themselves out is fairly critical. Again, just to help to, on the technical resource. Things like Blackwood, we have again, a correction via temperature and moisture content. Which brings us to certification. PEFC, Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification, is the world's largest forest certification system. PEFC is a non-profit, non-government organisation, totally independent. PEFC works throughout the entire forestry supply chain to promote good practice in forest to ensure that forest-based products are produced with respect for the highest ecological, social and ethical standards with rigorous checks and balances. I can tell you on several positions I hold that we go through PEFC or audits. They're annually. We look at PEFC and make sure that the audits are up to spec when we do our audits for timber qualities and that within the mills, and these are done quarterly with all the mills. So not only are we looking at, if you make a piece of flooring, is it the right size? Is it the right moisture content? Is it the right grade? But we also make sure that all the statutory regulations are there behind it. FSC, Forest Stewardship Council. FSC is an international non-profit organisation established to promote responsible management of the world's forest-fired timber certification. FSC unites individuals, both businesses, governments and NGOs under a common goal, protecting health, resilient forests for all forever. Very true, very similar to PEFC, are slightly different, and they have their set points of difference. They have set points of difference that are historical. But at the end of the day, does the difference matter? What matters? No, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that the timber selected by a specifier is certified. All Tasmanian timber is sourced from sustainable forests, and there is a chain of custody that we can chase back, and we do, and we have just done for a large flooring project. We've looked at e obliqua into basketball floors and come up with an international certification level for that timber in basketball floors, which we'll put up fairly shortly again. We'll have a whole article on that. So, people go, well, Tas Oak hasn't got a high enough yanker. Well, in fact, it does. And again, used for basketball floors internationally up against things like hard maple. In fact, it's actually come out technically better than hard maple. So we'll put that up fairly shortly. We can use that to trace, and we traced the material in the packs that was supplied to QDAF in Queensland, Department of Primary Industry, right back to their original source in the bush. So we can retrofill all this all the way back. Chain of custody, which I was just talking about, AS 4707, certification tracks forest-based products from the sustainable source to the final product. This sometimes becomes undone at retail shops and that don't hold it. They will show that they have PEFC up to that point. I think the clear thing there is that any timber supplied by any of the timber companies into professional builds, or any build for that matter, even through Bunnings, have full certification. It can get lost, and I had this question this morning, it can get lost in some of the larger chain stores where they're claiming to have a certification without having a chain of custody, which they shouldn't do, and we'll talk to them and the bodies about that. But that's the only disconnect we can find. The other connects are that you will get a responsible, if anything out of Tasmania will come with a responsible wood number and that, which you can then chase back, check. It's all on the Responsible Wood website. And what does it give us? It gives us peace of mind. Again, it's just a technical thing. It's really important to have a look at the numbers, and if you're at all in doubt, check back through the Responsible Woods website to make sure that the companies you're dealing with and the people that are supplying you have these chain of custodies in place. And they're fairly strict, breaking packs, doing other things, it impacts on the chain of custody. Carbon. Again, trees represent the most cost-effective carbon capture technology available. to sustainably reduce the global carbon balance, we must lower our carbon output and create carbon sinks. And that's what these new buildings do. We're storing massive amounts of carbon, and I know Claire's working on at the moment, looking at things like the Tas Stadium. How can we up the ante on the Tas Stadium as a carbon sink? How can we make it, a neutral thing that actually is sustainable, doesn't just use concrete and steel, and that we can get more timber in, not just for the aesthetics, not for the local timber community, but for the general community and the general environment. How can we store more carbon in that? And we're working hard on that basis. Where to now? Well, I think what we've come to today is please have a look at our website. Please come back to us with any questions. Anything we can do and anything we can, help you with, please email us. Please get on the phone. If we don't have the answer, we'll find the answer. If we can't find the answer, it probably can't be found. We have a huge network, Australia and worldwide, especially in things like fire and timber properties. We're in touch with FWPA. We're not trying to run this alone. The fire certificates, again, as I say, are run by FWPA on a regular basis. So these things are updated. Anything you'd like to see or have through, please shoot through. And as Peter has said, an aesthetics page, which is something we hadn't even thought about. We've got pictures of samples. We haven't, so if we can have a concentrated thing on that. So again, please have a look at the Tas Timber website and please come to us with any questions. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Mick. So I know from speaking and interviewing many architects and timber specifiers over the years that timber can be a difficult space to work in because there is so much variation, because it is a natural product and so on. The beautiful thing about having Mick as the technical manager for the campaign is that we do have an expert timber helpline, as I mentioned at the beginning. The number for that is 1300 041 766, and it's on the website, stuck to the menu at the top, so you don't need to remember it or write that down. If you go to the Tasmanian Timber website, which is tasmaniantimber.com.au, you'll always find that number there. Mick carries that phone constantly, so you don't need to remember all the detail. If you want to specify a Tasmanian timber, Mick is there as a resource to help you navigate the complexity of the right timber for the right application, where to find the volume you need for a particular project, and then, of course, the timber suppliers that provide those products. Through the Tasmanian Timber Campaign, there are around 6 suppliers. They are listed on the website. They are the main suppliers of Tasmanian timber that has been sourced from primarily the Crown, the public estate, which, as Mick mentioned, is all certified sustainable under PEFC. If you do want to dive a bit deeper into some of the detail on things like certification, through the website, you'll also find the Original Thinkers podcast. There's a interview there with the head of PEFC International talking about the scheme, and there are various other interviews with people from the Forest Practices Authority, who is the sort of key independent watchdog, I suppose, of implementing the Forest Practices Code. So there's lots of depth on those topics that you can sort of dive a bit deeper into when you have the time. But thank you so much for joining us today. There are 4 more webinars in the series that dive a bit deeper into various topics, and we look forward to joining or having you join us for those. But as Mick said, if there are other topics that you would like us to cover in depth, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll make sure that we put it on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you, Claire. As I say, this was just an overview on a series of questions that we received, over the last 6 to 8 months. The next webinars will be, with guests and looking at more depth on specific subjects. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. See you for the next one.